Hello everyone. Today we are going to revise Radon Quality Control SQC1 just tested more frequently in your exam and a minimum of 5 marks question comes. So let's start with the revision. Purpose of this standard is to establish standards and provide guidance regarding a firm's responsibility for its system of quality control for audits and reviews of historical financial information and for other assurance and related service engagements. The firm should establish a system of quality control designed to provide it with a reasonable assurance that the firm and its personnel comply with the professional standards and regulatory and legal requirements, and that reports issued by the firm or the engagement partners are appropriate in the circumstances. Certain definitions: engagement documentation, the record of work performed, results obtained, and conclusions the practitioner reach. Engagement partner, so it should be the from the firm, member of the institute, full-time practice, and responsible for the engagement and its performance and the report, plus have the appropriate authority from professional, legal, or regulatory body. Engagement quality control review is a process designed to provide an objective evaluation before the report is issued of significant judgments the engagement teams made and the conclusions they reached in formulating the report. The person who does this review is called as an engagement quality control reviewer. Engagement team, it involves all personnel performing an engagement, including any experts, but excludes any individual within the client's internal audit function who provide direct assistance on an audit engagement. This is in reference to SA 610, so very much important. Moving forward, the elements of system of quality control. The firm's system of quality control should include policies and procedures addressing each of the following elements. There are five elements. The first one, leadership responsibilities for quality within the firm. The firm should establish policies and procedures designed to promote an internal culture based on the recognition that quality is essential in performing engagement. Means you have to put in the culture of the organization. Such policies and procedures should require the firm's managing partners or equivalent to assume ultimate responsibility for the firm's system of quality control, provided they have sufficient appropriate experience and ability and the necessary authority to assume that responsibility. So someone has to take a responsibility as well. Third, it emphasizes the requirement to perform work that complies with professional standards and regulatory and legal requirements and issue reports that are appropriate in these circumstances. The firm assigns its management responsibilities so that the commercial considerations do not override quality of the work. Means commercial consideration should never override the quality. The firm's policies and procedures addressing performance evaluation, compensation, and promotion with regards to its personnel are designed to demonstrate the firm's commitment to quality. The firm devotes sufficient resources for the development, documentation, and support of quality control policies and procedures. These are points you can drive when it comes to leadership responsibilities. Talking about ethical requirements, this is second requirement element. So the firm should establish policies and procedures to comply with relevant ethical requirement. The code establishes, code here refers to the code of ethics, establishes the fundamental principles of professional ethics, which includes IOPCP, integrity, objectivity, professional competence, and due care, confidentiality, and professional behavior. The code includes a conceptual approach to independence, and very much important, including aspects such as threats to independence, accepted safeguards, and the public interest. The firm's policies and procedures should emphasize the fundamental principles which are reinforced in particular by leadership of the firm, education and training, monitoring, and a process for dealing with the non-compliance. Moving forward, the third element of the SQC1, the acceptance and continuance of client relationship and specific engagement. Somewhere it's the most tested one. So the firm shall undertake and continue relationships and engagements only where it has considered the integrity of the client, is competent to perform the engagement and has capabilities, time, and resources to do so, and can comply with ethical requirements. We'll be seeing three things on these 3 points. Obtain such information before accepting an engagement with a new client or when considering acceptance of a new engagement with an existing client. Where issues have been identified and the firm decides to accept or continue the client relationship with a specific engagement, it should document how the issues were resolved. Now, with regards to integrity of a client, matters the firm should consider are identity and the business reputation of the client's principal owners, a key management and related parties, and those charged with governance. Information concerning their attitude towards matters such as aggressive interpretation of accounting standards and the internal control environment. The client is aggressively concerned with maintaining the firm's fee as low as possible. Inappropriate limitation in scope of work. Indications that the client might be involved in money laundering or other criminal activities. Nature of the client's operations and reasons for the proposed appointment of a new firm or non-reappointment of the previous firm. These are very much key points of this integrity testing of the client. Information on this integrity can be obtained from communications with existing or previous providers of professional accountancy services to the client, inquiry of other personnel or third parties such as bankers, legal counsel, and industry peers, background searches of relevant databases. The next point is about the capabilities, competence, times, and resources. The matters the firm must consider include whether there is appropriate knowledge of relevant industries, experience with relevant regulatory or reporting requirements, or ability to gain the necessary skills, sufficient personnel with necessary capabilities, experts are available if needed, individuals meeting the criteria and eligibility requirements to perform the engagement quality control review are available and complete the engagement with a reporting deadline. Again, very much important. The firm also considers whether accepting an engagement from a new or an existing client may give rise to an actual or perceived conflict of interest. Whether firm obtains information that would have caused it to decline in engagement, that information had been available earlier, policies and procedures should include consideration of professional and legal responsibilities that apply to the circumstances, including a requirement for the firm to report to the person or persons who made the appointment, or in some cases to regulatory authorities. So, the professional and legal responsibilities should become as one of the parts. And second, possibility of withdrawing from the engagement or from the both engagement and client relationship. Now, policies and procedure on withdrawal from an engagement or client relationships include the following. So, second point, जो पिछले point का था, in that there is further procedures you need to follow. First, discuss with the management and those charged with governance regarding the appropriate action that firm might take based on the relevant facts and circumstances. Second, if the firm determines that it is appropriate to withdraw, discuss with reasons for the withdrawal. Consider whether there is professional legal requirement, as said earlier, and whether there is a requirement to report also or not. And have to document the issues, consultations, conclusions, and the basis for the conclusions. Very much important. With this, we end with the third element description. Moving on to the fourth element, human resources. Firm should establish policies and procedures designed to provide it with a reasonable assurance that it has sufficient personnel with capabilities, competence, and commitment to ethical principles necessary to promote, perform its engagements. Such policies and procedures address the following issues: recruitment, performance evaluation, capabilities, competence, career development, promotion, compensation, and estimation of personal needs. Capabilities and competence are developed through a variety of methods, including the following: professional education, continuing professional development, including training, work experience, coaching by more experienced staff, for example, other members of the engagement team. The firm's performance evaluation, compensation, and promotion procedures give due recognition and reward to development and maintenance of competence and commitment to ethical principles. It makes personnel aware of the firm's expectations regarding performance and ethical principles. It provides personnel with evaluation of and counseling on performance, progress, and career development, and helps personnel understand that advancement to position of greater responsibilities depends upon performance quality and adherence to ethical principles. Engagement performance is the fifth element. Through its policies and procedures, the firm seeks to establish consistency in quality of the engagement performance. Matters addressed include the following: how engagement teams are briefed on the engagement to obtain an understanding of the objectives of their work, Processes for complying with applicable engagement standards, processes of engagement supervision, staff training, and coaching, methods of reviewing the work performed, the significant judgments made in the form of report being issued, appropriate documentation of the work performed, and timing and extent of review, and processes to keep all processes and procedures current. So these are very much key points which comes in mind a firm should keep while working towards engagement performance. So here the work you do, the review processes and documentation processes. These are all things which are matters addressed by this fifth element. One of the key elements, supervision. Supervision includes what? Tracking the progress of the engagement, considering the capabilities and competence of the individual members of the engagement team, addressing significant issues arising during the engagement, identifying matters for consultation or consideration by more experienced engagement team members. Now, reviewers consider whether the work has been performed in accordance with professional standards and regulatory legal requirements. Significant matters have been raised for further consideration. Appropriate consultations have been taken place, and resulting conclusions have been documented and implemented. There is a need to revise an NPE of work performed. The work performed supports the conclusions reached and is documented appropriately. The evidence obtained is sufficient and appropriate to support the report, and objectives of the engagement procedures have been achieved. So, key difference in supervision and review. Supervision happens while you are doing the audit or review or any other type of assurance engagement. Review is something which is done after the audit has been completed or before signing of the document. So very much important. Keep this in mind. Peer review is something which happens after the audits or after an engagement. Before signing of the audit report, a review happens as an engagement quality control review, which checks all these things. At that time, it has no supervision, there is a review. This difference you must understand. Now coming to one more point is consultation. A firm should establish policies and procedures designed to provide with a reasonable assurance that appropriate consultation takes place on difficult or contentious matters. Sufficient resources are available to enable appropriate consultation to take place. Nature and scope of such consultations are documented, and conclusions resulting from consultations are documented and implemented. Monitoring. The firm should establish policies and procedures relating to system of quality control that are relevant, adequate, and operating effectively and complied with in practice. The purpose of monitoring compliance with quality control policies and procedures is to provide an evaluation of adherence to professional standards and regulatory and legal requirements, and whether the quality control system, policies, and procedures have been appropriately designed and effectively implemented so that reports that are issued by the firm or the engagement partners are appropriate in these circumstances. So the sixth element, which is monitoring, will talk about whether they are appropriately complying with the professional requirements. And second, the quality control system is there, whether it is there first of all, whether it is whether it is effectively implemented. The things which are kept in mind. So monitoring is very much important. One of another after the acceptance, this is the most tested element. Ongoing consideration and evaluation of system of quality controls includes matters such as the following: analysis of new developments in the professional standards and legal requirements, and how are they reflected in the firm's policies when appropriate. Written confirmation of compliance with policies and procedures on independence. Continuing professional development, including training. Decisions related to acceptance and continuance of client relationship and specific engagements. Determination of corrective actions to be taken and improvements to be made in the system, including provision of feedback. Communication to appropriate firm personnel of the weaknesses identified in the system in the level of understanding of the system or compliance with it. Very much important. And follow up by appropriate firm personnel so that necessary modifications are promptly made to the quality control policies and procedures. This ongoing consideration point, again, very much tested and very much important questions for exam. Next, engagements selected for inspection include at least one engagement for each engagement partner over an inspection cycle, which ordinarily spans no more than 3 years. I see this can be tested for MCQ. So, one engagement per engagement partner and every 3 years. Not more than three. That's keyword. Okay. Manner in which inspection cycle is organized depends on many factors, including the size, number and geography, location of office, results of previous monitoring procedures, degree of authority of both personnel and offices, have nature and complexity of the firm's practice and the organization, risks associated with the firm's clients and specific engagements. The firm should evaluate the effect of deficiencies and determine whether they are either instances that do not necessarily indicate the firm's system of quality control is insufficient, systemic, repetitive, or other significant deficiencies that require prompt corrective action. The firm's evaluation of each type of deficiency should result in recommendation for one or more of the following. Taking appropriate remedial action in relation to the engagement, individual engagement or a member of personnel. The communication of the findings to those responsible for training and professional development, changes to the quality control policies and procedures, and disciplinary actions against those who fail to comply with the policies, especially those who do so repeatedly. This is very much type of important question which can ask on deficiency that result in recommendation. This is something which is not yet tested sometimes, but can be asked. So keep these points in mind. At least annually, the firm should communicate the results of monitoring of quality control system to engagement partners and other appropriate individuals within the firm, enabling to take prompt and appropriate action when necessary. Information communicated should include the following: description of the monitoring procedures performed, conclusions drawn from the monitoring procedures, where relevant, a description of systemic, repetitive, or other significant deficiencies and of the actions taken to resolve and amend those deficiencies. Appropriate documentation relating to monitoring sets out monitoring procedures, including the procedures for selecting completed engagements to be inspected, records the evaluation of the purpose of monitoring compliance with quality control policies and procedures, identifies the deficiencies noted, evaluates their effects, and sets out the basis for determining whether and what further action is necessary. Coming on to the independence, the firm should establish policies and procedures enabling the firm to communicate its independence requirements to its personnel and, where applicable, to others. Identify and evaluate circumstances and relationships that create threats to independence and to take appropriate action to eliminate those threats or reduce them to an acceptable level by applying safeguards or, if considered appropriate, to withdraw from the engagement. This point, independence, is something which is important apart from the six elements, hence covered in SQC1, and very much important independence. You will also get reference to it when you are doing SRS, SRE standards as well. Okay, such policies continuing further on independence. Such policies and procedures should require engagement partners to provide the firm with relevant information about client engagement, including the scope of services, personnel to promptly notify the firm of circumstances and relationships that create a threat to independence, and communication of relevant information to appropriate personnel so that they can determine whether they satisfy independence requirements, maintain and update its record relating to independence, and take appropriate action leading to identify threats to independence. The policies and procedures should include requirements for all who are subject to independence requirements to promptly notify the firm of independence breaches of which they become aware, promptly communicate identified breaches to engagement partner and other relevant personnel in the firm, and those subject to independence requirement, prompt communication to the firm by them so that they can determine whether it should take further action. At least annually, the firm should obtain written confirmation of compliance with its policies and procedures on independence from all firm personnel required to be independent in terms of the requirement of the code. The firm should set out criteria for determining the need for safeguards to reduce the familiarity threat. For all audits of listed entities requiring the rotation of engagement partner after a specified period in compliance for the code. Specifically for audits, the engagement partner should be rotated after a predefined period, normally not more than 7 years. Again, tested in MCQs. In determining appropriate criteria, the firm considers such matters as nature of the engagement and the length of the service of the senior personnel. Very important. These two factors are very important. I mean, this can be tested in MCQ. Moving forward, assignment of engagement teams. Again, this is the most important point. And again, this is also tested in exam after independence. The firm should assign responsibility for each engagement to an engagement partner. The firm should establish policies and procedures requiring that identity and role of the engagement partner are communicated to key members of the client's management and those charged with governance. Engagement partner has appropriate capabilities, competence, authority, and time to perform the role, and the responsibility of the engagement partner are clearly defined and communicated to that partner. The capabilities and competence considered when assigning the engagement teams include the following: understanding of the practical experience with the engagements of a similar nature and complexity through appropriate training and participation, an understanding of professional standards and regulatory and legal requirements, appropriate technical knowledge, including relevant information about IT, knowledge of relevant industries in which clients operate, and ability to apply professional judgment. Coming on to the next very tested point, difference of opinion. The firm should establish policies and procedures for dealing with and resolving differences of opinion within the relevant engagement team, and with those consulted where applicable between the engagement partner and engagement quality control reviewer. Conclusions reached should be documented and implemented. Where the engagement quality control reviewer makes a recommendations that the engagement partner does not accept and the matter is not resolved to the reviewer's satisfaction, report is not issued until the matter is resolved by following the firm's procedure for dealing with differences of opinion. Engagement quality control review. The firm should establish policies and procedures that require an engagement quality control review for all audits of financial statements of listed entities. Set out criteria against which all other audits, review, assurance, and related service engagement should be evaluated to determine whether an engagement quality control review should be performed require the same if meets the criteria. So this is very much important about engagement quality control review. Again, nice thing which is tested in exam. Since peer review or something concepts have been removed, so it's these points are as well tested. So let's have focus on these as well. The firm's policies and procedures should require completion of the engagement quality control review. Year and after, I'll refer to this as review only before the report is issued. Criteria that a firm considers when determining which engagements other than audit of financial statements of listed entities are subject to a review include the following: nature of the engagement, identification of unusual circumstances or risk in an engagement or a class of engagement, whether law or regulation require an engagement quality control review. The firm should establish policies setting out the nature, timing, and extent of review, criteria for eligibility of the reviewers, and documentation requirements for a review. Let us see these 3 points in detail. NTE of review include engagement team's evaluation of firm's independence. Independence is the first. Significant risk identified during the engagement and responses to this risk. So significant risk is the second. Judgment made, particularly with respect to materiality and significant risk. Judgment is the third. Whether appropriate consultation has taken place on matters involving differences of opinion or other difficult or contentious matters and the conclusions arising from those consultations. Fourth one, consultations. Significance and disposition of corrected and uncorrected misstatements identified during the engagement. Corrected and uncorrected misstatements. The fifth thing is this: matters to be communicated to the engagement management and those other governance and where applicable other parties as regulatory bodies. Matters to be communicated is the sixth point. Whether working papers lettered for review reflect the work performed in relation to the significant judgments made and support the conclusions reached. Working papers. and the appropriateness of the report to be issued. Report. These are all NTE points. The firm's policies address the appointment of engagement quality control reviewers and establish the eligibility through technical qualifications required to perform the role, necessary experience and authority, and degree to which a reviewer can be consulted on the engagement without compromising the objectivity. The reviewer is not selected by the engagement partner, does not participate in the engagement during the period of review, does not make decisions for the engagement team, and is not subject to other considerations that would threaten the reviewer's objectivity. Can be tested in MCQs. The engagement partner may consult the engagement quality control reviewer during the engagement. Such consultation need not compromise the reviewer's eligibility to perform the role or provide the replacement where the ability may be impaired. Policies shall include procedures required by the firm. Policies on review have been performed. Review has been completed before the report is issued, and the reviewer is not aware of any unresolved matters that would cause the reviewer to believe that the significant judgments the engagement team made and the conclusions they reached were not appropriate. So overall, engagement quality control review is a topic where NTEs can be tested for descriptive answers, as all points can be tested for MCQs. Moving forward to the last concept of SQC1, engagement documentation. Law or regulation may prescribe the time limits by which assembly of final engagements filed on a specific type of engagement should be completed. Where no such time limits are prescribed, the firm establishes the time limits appropriate to the nature of the engagement. In case of an audit, for example, such a time limit is ordinarily not more than 60 days after the date of auditor's report. This means if it is a review engagement, assurance engagement, related service engagement, there is no 60 days limit because it is appropriate time limit. But for audit, it is 60 days. The firm must design and implement appropriate controls for engagement documentation to enable the determination of when and by whom engagement documentation was created, changed, or reviewed. Protect the integrity of the information at all stages of the engagement. Prevent unauthorized changes to the engagement documentation and allow access to the engagement documentation by the engagement team and other authorized parties as necessary to properly discharge their responsibility. Examples of controls include the firm's design and implements appropriate controls for engagement to use password among engagement team members, appropriate backup routines for electronic engagement documentation at appropriate stages during the engagement, procedures for properly distributing engagement documentation to the team members at the start of the engagement, processing it during the engagement, collating it at the end of the engagement. Procedures for restricting access to and enabling proper distribution and confidential storage of hard copy engagement documentation. In specific case of audit engagements, the retention period ordinarily is no shorter than 7 years from the date of auditor's report, or if later, the date of root auditor's report. Engagement documentation is the property of the firm. The firm may, at its discretion, make portions of or extracts from engagement documentation available to its clients, provided such disclosure does not undermine the validity of the work performed, or in case of assurance engagements, the independence of the firm or its personnel. With this, I completely summarize the SQC1. Please note the six elements that I discussed are repeated in essay 220 as well. So there also it will be helpful. With this, I conclude. All the best for the exams. Thank you.